I never cared much for renovations. That was always Emily's thing. She had a vision for our home, one she had been talking about for years. New hardwood floors, an open-concept kitchen, recessed lighting, a fresh coat of paint to make everything feel new again. Me? I liked things the way they were. But marriage was about compromise, and I had no energy to argue over countertops and backsplash designs. So, when she finally convinced me that it was time to give our house a modern touch, I let her handle everything. She picked the contractor, managed the budget, and oversaw the work while I stayed out of it. The guy she hired, Marco, seemed like your average construction worker. Mid-40s, tan skin from years under the sun, built like a man who lifted more bricks than weights. He came with a small crew, all of them efficient and polite, always arriving early and leaving late. At first, I didn't think much of him. Why would I? He was just another worker, someone we paid to do a job. Emily, on the other hand, was very interested in the renovations, more than I had ever seen her before. She was constantly around, watching the progress, asking questions, hovering over Marco as if every decision depended on his personal approval. She was always outside when they worked on the porch, always in the kitchen when they installed the cabinets, always somewhere nearby when he was around. I figured she just liked being hands-on. That was how she had always been, detail-oriented, meticulous. I let it slide. I had no reason not to. Then, about 3 weeks in, I found the check. It happened by accident. I had just finished my coffee and was heading upstairs when I noticed the trash can in our bedroom overflowing. Emily usually took care of things like that, but I was already up, so I figured I'd empty it. I grabbed a handful of crumpled up tissues and receipts, and that's when I saw it, half hidden beneath the trash, as if it had been shoved down in a hurry. A hotel receipt. At first, I didn't react. My brain didn't fully register what I was looking at. It was just a piece of paper, after all. Could have been from anything. But then I looked closer. The name of the hotel. A cheap, no-name place just a few blocks from our house. The date. 2 days ago. The amount. Not enough for an overnight stay. Just enough for a few hours. I stood there, gripping the paper, my fingers tightening with every passing second. The air around me suddenly felt heavier. My chest felt tight. No, it couldn't be. But the more I stared at it, the more the reality of it sank in. My heart pounded against my ribs, and a hot, bitter anger spread through me, starting in my stomach and crawling up to my throat. This wasn't just some innocent mistake. There was no reason for Emily to be in a cheap hotel near our house. Not at that price, not on that date. A hotel like that wasn't for staying. It was for hiding. I swallowed hard, my breath coming in sharp bursts as my mind raced back through the past few weeks. Suddenly, all the small things, the ones I had ignored, brushed off, dismissed, came rushing back like a punch to the gut. Emily's sudden excitement about the renovations. How she always seemed happier on the days Marco was around. How she lingered by the front door when he arrived, watching him with an expression that wasn't just polite interest. It was something else. The way she had started dressing differently. It hadn't hit me before, but now it was impossible to ignore. Tighter jeans, low-cut tops, makeup even when she wasn't leaving the house. And then there was Marco. The way he smiled at her. The way he made little jokes just for her. The way his hand would sometimes rest on the small of her back when he leaned in to show her something I'd been too blind or too trusting to call out before. My grip on the receipt tightened until the paper crumpled in my fist. I turned, walked over to the window, and looked outside. The sun was blinding, but I could still see them. Him, her, standing too close. Talking, laughing. Emily had her hand on her hip, tilting her head in that way she did when she was flirting. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. My wife, the woman I had trusted, the woman I had loved. And now all I could feel was rage. I didn't move from the window. I couldn't. My hands were locked into fists, the crumpled check pressing into my palm, so hard the edges dug into my skin. But I didn't feel it. All I felt was the slow, simmering burn of anger spreading through me, like a fire that had been quietly smoldering for weeks, finally catching enough air to explode into flames. I watched them, Emily and Marco. She stood close, too close. The kind of close that wasn't just friendly, wasn't just casual. The kind of close where every breath, Every movement, every word meant something unspoken. She laughed at something he said, her head tilting back slightly, exposing the curve of her throat, the same way she used to laugh with me. Marco grinned, his hand gesturing as he talked, and I noticed how his eyes flickered down, just for a second. Before he looked back up, he had no shame. None. And my stomach twisted. She wasn't pulling away. She wasn't just standing there listening to him talk. She was inviting it, encouraging it. Every single thing I had ignored before. The extra effort in her appearance, the late nights when she swore she was running errands, the sudden, unexplained energy whenever Marco's crew showed up. It all made sense now. I had been a fool, and now I had proof. The check in my hand was all I needed. I didn't need to play detective, didn't need to piece together a mystery. I knew. She had been sneaking off to a hotel just a few blocks away while I was at work, while Marco was supposed to be renovating my house. I felt my teeth grind together as I forced myself to breathe, to stay still. Every instinct in my body told me to go downstairs right now, march up to them, shove the receipt in her face, and watch the blood drain from her lying, cheating expression. But I didn't. Not yet. I wasn't going to just confront her. I was going to make her feel it. I wanted her to know that I wasn't some clueless idiot, some blind fool who had no idea what was happening under his own roof. I wanted her to see, in real time, that she had been caught, that there was no wriggling out of this, no excuses she could come up with, no carefully crafted lie that could erase the evidence I held in my hand. I turned from the window, gripping the check as I strode out of the bedroom, my footsteps heavy on the floor. My mind was a storm, but my body was steady. The rage burned hot, but my hands weren't shaking. Not yet. I stepped into the hallway, pausing just outside the staircase that led down to the living room. From there, I had a perfect view of the front door, the spot where Emily and Marco were still talking just beyond the porch. I took my time. I wanted to see her, to watch how she would react when she realized her little secret was no longer secret. So I waited. I stood at the top of the stairs, my arms crossed, the crumpled check still in my fist. And when Emily finally turned, stepping inside, her face still glowing with whatever disgusting little thrill she had been feeling, her eyes met mine. And I saw it. That moment. That half second where her expression faltered, where her smile froze, her brows knitted together in confusion before shifting, just slightly, into something else. Fear. She knew. She saw my face, and she knew. "Hey," she said, her voice light, casual, but I could hear it now. That slight hesitation. That forced ease. "I didn't know you were home early." I didn't respond. I just watched her. Her smile wavered under my silence, and she cleared her throat, stepping further inside. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice dipping just a little lower. Softer. That calm, careful tone people use when they're trying to test the waters, trying to figure out how much you know. I let the silence stretch between us before I finally moved. Slowly, deliberately, I stepped forward down one step, then another. Then, without a word, I raised my hand, the one holding the crumpled check. Emily's eyes flicked to it, and I saw the exact moment she realized what it was. Her entire body tensed, her pupils dilated, her lips parted just slightly, as if she wanted to speak, but couldn't find the words. Good. I wanted her to be speechless. I wanted her to feel that drop in her stomach, that cold, sinking panic that comes with knowing you've been caught. But I wasn't done yet. I reached the bottom step and uncurled my fingers, letting the crumpled check fall onto the small table beside the stairs. "I found this in the bedroom," I said, my voice low, even, controlled. Emily stared at it like it was a snake coiled to strike. She swallowed, her throat bobbing as she lifted her gaze back to me. I held up a hand. Not yet. Not before I had all of it. Not before she had nowhere to run. Because this wasn't just about a single check. This was about everything. Every lie. Every moment she thought she was getting away with it. And I was going to watch her crumble. The silence between us was suffocating. I could hear every small sound. The hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the faint voices of Marco's crew outside, the distant barking of a dog down the street. But between me and Emily, nothing. Just the thick, choking weight of what she had done. She stood there, her hands frozen at her sides, her body stiff, as if she was deciding whether to run or fight. Her gaze flickered between my face and the crumpled hotel receipt I had dropped on the table beside the stairs. She knew exactly what it was. She knew exactly what it meant. And now, she had to face it. I could see the gears turning in her head. She was thinking, calculating, trying to figure out what I knew, how much I had seen, how much she could still twist and manipulate before she had to admit anything. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. She swallowed, her throat bobbing, before finally taking a breath and trying to put on the face. The one she always used when she wanted to get out of trouble. Soft eyes, slightly furrowed brows, a hint of concern, but not too much because too much meant she had something to hide. I knew that face. I had seen it before on smaller things. Things like when she overspent on a shopping trip and said she'd return half of it, but never did. Or when she forgot to do something important and swore she had, only to scramble at the last second to cover her lie. But this wasn't about shopping sprees or forgotten promises. This was about her body, her hands, her lips. With him, Emily took a slow, careful step toward the table, her movements rehearsed, her hands clasped together like she was bracing herself for something she could still control. "What's this?" she asked, tilting her head slightly, her voice carrying that artificial innocence that only a liar could master. I didn't blink. I didn't move. I just stared, and I watched the first flicker of panic flash behind her eyes when she realized that her tricks weren't going to work this time. She reached for the receipt, fingers trembling just slightly as she picked it up, unfolding it as if she had never seen it before in her life. As if this was some strange piece of evidence that had somehow landed in her trash without her knowledge. A full 3 seconds passed before she let out a forced laugh. A small, breathy, nervous sound. "Oh," she said, shaking her head like she had just remembered something completely innocent. "This must be—" I stepped forward. Just one step. But it was enough to make her flinch. I saw it. The tiny, involuntary jerk in her shoulders. The way her breath hitched for just a moment before she forced herself to act normal. "Keep going," I said. My voice was flat. "Empty." Emily blinked, her mouth opening and closing slightly, like she was waiting for me to give her something. A cue. A weakness. I gave her nothing. She took another breath, smoothing out the receipt between her fingers, as if touching it for long enough would rewrite reality. "This must be from when she hesitated. The pause was too long. The air between us too heavy. I had lunch with Claire. You know Claire, right? Claire. Her best friend. The one she dragged into her lies whenever she needed an alibi." I clenched my jaw. She really thought I was stupid enough to buy that. I let out a slow breath, letting my silence stretch long enough for her to feel it, long enough for her to squirm. I didn't look at the receipt. I didn't need to. I had already memorized the details. "This hotel is a 5-minute walk from our house," I said finally, my voice calm. "Controlled. You expect me to believe that you and Claire had a nice little lunch date at some rundown motel?" Emily froze for just a second. Just one. But I caught it. She forced another laugh, this one even weaker than before. No, of course not. She swallowed, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. "We were actually looking at event spaces. Claire's thinking about hosting a party, and I told her about that place. We just wanted to check the rates." I stared at her. She blinked. I didn't say a word. She shifted again. "You can ask her," Emily added quickly, her voice gaining an edge of desperation now. "She'll tell you." I laughed. Just once. A sharp, humorless sound that cut straight through her pathetic excuse. "You really think I'm going to ask Claire anything?" I said. "You really think I'm going to call her up and say, 'Hey, did you and my wife tour a goddamn motel together?'" Emily's mouth snapped shut. Her hands curled into fists at her sides. She was getting frustrated now. Angry. Not because she was innocent. Because her excuses weren't working. "You're being ridiculous," she said, her tone sharpening. "I don't know why you're—" I took another step forward. She stepped back. "Good. I found it in our bedroom trash," I said, my voice low, steady. "Crumpled up, buried under other trash. If it was just some innocent receipt, why didn't you throw it out downstairs? Or in the kitchen? Why was it hidden?" Emily's lips parted, but this time nothing came out. I watched as the realization hit her. She had nothing, no lie to save her, no way out. For the first time since she had walked inside, her shoulders dropped. Her expression changed. The fake concern vanished. The frustration disappeared. All that was left was guilt. Raw, ugly, undeniable. I could almost see it. The moment she understood that this wasn't a fight she could win. I leaned in slightly, my voice barely above a whisper. "You did it," I said. Emily swallowed. "No, you did it." She opened her mouth, closed it. Her breathing turned shaky, and I knew, without a doubt, that this was only the beginning. Emily stood there, her face pale, her lips parted as if she wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. She had nowhere to go now, nowhere to run, nowhere to twist the truth into something that could save her. I saw it in her eyes. She knew that I knew. And yet, even with the weight of the truth pressing down on her, she still couldn't just admit it. That was the thing about liars. They didn't confess when they were caught. They doubled down. They stalled. They searched for cracks in the foundation of their own lies, desperate to build another excuse before the walls came crumbling down. And Emily? She was still trying. She let out a shaky breath, her fingers curling around the crumpled receipt like it might somehow change if she held it long enough. As if the numbers would shift, the date would disappear, the evidence would dissolve right there in her hands. "You're wrong," she whispered, shaking her head. Her voice was softer now, almost fragile, almost believable, like she was the one being hurt, like I was the one accusing her of something absurd. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to reach through that pathetic excuse for a defense and rip it apart. "Wrong," I echoed. My voice was low, steady, but I could feel the sharp edge of fury pressing against the back of my throat, waiting to be unleashed. "Then tell me, Emily. Tell me what really happened." She hesitated, just for a second, but a second was all I needed. Her shoulders lifted with a slow, forced breath. And then, just like that, she started talking. "The hotel." She stopped herself, chewing on her bottom lip like she was still thinking. Another pause. "It's not what you think." My jaw tightened. That sentence alone was enough to send a fresh wave of rage through me. It's not what you think. The classic line. The one cheaters always used when they had nothing else to say. When they knew they were caught. I took a slow step forward. Emily instinctively stepped back. "Go ahead," I said, voice quiet. "Tell me what I'm supposed to think, then." Her fingers twitched. Her eyes darted to the front door. The smallest glance, but I caught it. She was looking for a way out. She was thinking of running. Not physically, no. She wouldn't just bolt out of the house and leave. But mentally, she was searching for a way to dodge this. To escape before she had to say the words that would shatter everything. I wasn't going to let her. "Marco," I said, watching her carefully. She flinched, just barely. But I saw it. And that was all the confirmation I needed. "You've been fucking him," I said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a theory. It was a fact. Emily's entire body tensed, and for a brief, fleeting moment, I thought she was going to break. I thought I'd finally get the truth, the confession, the pathetic little sob of regret that would make her sink to her knees and admit that she had destroyed everything we had. But instead, she shook her head. "No," she said. That was it. One word. No. Flat. Hollow. Useless. I clenched my fists, exhaling sharply through my nose. "Don't lie to me, Emily." "I'm not lying," she snapped. The sudden burst of anger caught me off guard for a second. But then it made sense. She was shifting, turning the blame onto me. This was another tactic, another last-ditch effort to turn the entire conversation on its head before I had the chance to bury her beneath the weight of what she had done. "I can't believe you're accusing me of this," she continued, her voice rising now, shaking with fake outrage. "I have done nothing wrong, and you're standing here, acting like—" I let out a short, bitter laugh. She stopped. Her eyes flickered to me again, uncertain now. She knew. She knew that I wasn't buying it. "You're good," I said, shaking my head slowly. "Really good." Almost had me for a second there. Emily's lips pressed together. "You think you can flip this on me?" I asked. "You think you can start screaming and get me to doubt what I already know?" She inhaled sharply, like she was about to argue again, but I cut her off before she had the chance. I found a receipt in the trash in our bedroom. I took another step forward. She stepped back again. I watched you flirt with Marco in our driveway just 10 minutes ago. Another step, another retreat. I've seen the way you look at him. I've seen the way he looks at you. She swallowed hard. You want to keep lying? I asked. You want to dig yourself even deeper? Emily's lower lip trembled. For the first time, real fear flashed across her face. Good. She should be afraid. Because I wasn't done. I reached into my back pocket, pulled out my phone, and held it up. You think I didn't check your texts? Her breath hitched. I saw her entire world collapse in a single second. And I had never felt so much hatred for a single person in my entire life. She wasn't expecting that. She had been so careful, deleting messages, making sure there was nothing obvious left behind. But cheaters always thought they were smarter than they were. They always left something. And Emily? She had left just enough. Her phone had synced with our shared account. Her messages weren't gone. I had seen them. And now, I watched her fall apart under the weight of it. Still gonna lie to me? I asked, my voice quiet. Emily's chest rose and fell in uneven breaths. Her hands were shaking now, her fingers gripping the edge of the receipt like it was the only thing keeping her from collapsing. I waited. She didn't speak. She didn't deny it. She just stood there. And in that silence, she finally confessed, without saying a single word. She didn't speak. She didn't try to argue. She didn't say a single word. But she didn't have to. Her silence was her confession. I saw it in the way her hands trembled, in the way her chest rose and fell in sharp, uneven breaths, in the way she clutched that crumpled receipt like it was some kind of lifeline, something she could still hold on to, as if that tiny slip of paper wasn't the very thing that had set everything on fire. She was breaking, piece by piece. I could see it happening, and I wanted her to feel it. I wanted her to feel every ounce of the humiliation, the shame, the panic, the absolute terror of being caught with nowhere to run. Because that's exactly what she had done to me. She had made me look like a fool, a man walking through his own home blind, while she was sneaking around behind my back. I had trusted her, and she had spit on it. Emily finally exhaled, but it wasn't a normal breath. It was shaky, like she was trying to steady herself, trying to push back the inevitable. Her lips parted, and for a second, I thought she was about to say the words. The truth. The admission. But instead, she turned away. She turned her back to me. Like a coward. Like someone who still, even now, thought she could escape this if she just pretended it wasn't happening. I felt something snap inside me. She wasn't even going to face me. I took a sharp step forward, my voice low, sharp. Turn around. Emily flinched. She didn't move right away. Her back remained stiff, her arms wrapped tightly around herself like a child caught in a lie. Like if she just held herself together hard enough, she could keep from falling apart completely. Turn. Around. This time, my voice came out colder. She did. Slowly. Reluctantly. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw real fear there. And good. She should be afraid. Because I wasn't playing her game anymore. I read your texts. Emily's breath caught. She didn't speak, but her eyes widened, and that was all I needed to see. Yeah, I said, my voice steady, unshaken. I know. She swallowed hard, her throat moving in a tight, forced gulp. There it was. That moment. That exact second where she realized there was no more lying her way out of this. Because she knew. She knew if I had read those messages, then there was nothing left to deny, nothing left to twist. Nothing left to manipulate. I could see it all in her face, the way her lips parted slightly, the way her breathing picked up, the way her shoulders curled and like she wanted to fold into herself. You. Her voice cracked. She tried again, forcing something out, anything. You read my messages? I let out a sharp breath, laughing bitterly. She sounded so shocked, like the idea of me figuring it out was something she had never even considered. And that was the part that really burned, wasn't it? She had thought she was smarter than me. She had thought I was just some idiot husband who would never check, never question, never realize what was happening right under my own goddamn roof. And now she had to stand there, completely exposed, completely vulnerable, completely fucking helpless because for the first time in this entire thing, she had lost. I read everything, I said, my voice quieter now, but there was no softness in it. Every single word. Emily's breathing hitched. I could see her mind scrambling, try to remember what I had seen, trying to calculate how much she could still spin. But it didn't matter, because I had seen enough. And the next words out of my mouth shattered whatever tiny, desperate thread of control she thought she had left. I saw what he called you. Her face drained of color. Completely. She froze. She stopped blinking, stopped moving, stopped breathing. And there it was. That perfect moment of realization. She knew exactly what I was talking about. She remembered the messages. She remembered the words. The things she had let him call her. The way she had responded to them. And she knew that if I had seen that, if I had read those messages, then there was nothing left. Nothing left to save. Nothing left to explain. Emily let out a choked breath, barely a sound. Her lips trembled, and her hands gripped the edge of the staircase, railing like she needed it to hold herself up. She looked at me like she wanted to say something. But what could she even say? There was nothing. Absolutely nothing. And so, she broke. Her shoulders collapsed inward. Her legs gave out slightly, forcing her to lean against the railing. Her eyes, wide, full of something too messy to even describe, lowered to the floor, like she couldn't bear to meet mine anymore. And then, finally, she spoke. Not loud, not angry, not defensive, not a single excuse. Just one word. Please. And I just stared at her, because she didn't deserve mercy. Not anymore. Please. That was all she could say. Not I'm sorry. Not I can explain. Not it was a mistake. Just please. Pathetic. I stared at her, letting the weight of the words settle between us. Letting her hear the way it sounded. Small, desperate, useless. I wanted her to feel exactly how meaningless that word was to me. Emily didn't move. She stood there, gripping the railing like it was the only thing holding her up, her breathing uneven, her eyes refusing to meet mine. She had nothing left. No lies. No excuses. No way out. And yet, she still wasn't saying the one thing that mattered. I did it. I cheated. I betrayed you. Nothing. Just a trembling please. I clenched my jaw, my fingers twitching at my sides, my pulse hammering against my skull. Please. I echoed, my voice low, empty. Emily swallowed hard, blinking rapidly like she was trying to hold herself together. She hesitated, her lips parting and closing, like the words were stuck somewhere in her throat. It wasn't. Don't. The word came out sharper than I expected, cutting through the air between us. Emily flinched. I stepped forward. Not fast, not aggressive, just deliberate. And I watched her instinctively step back. She was scared. Good. She should be. I wasn't going to hit her. I wasn't going to scream in her face. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. But I was going to make sure she knew that her bullshit no longer worked on me. I kept walking. Slow, steady, measured. Emily backed up until her back hit the wall. She had nowhere left to go. Her breath was shaky now, her chest rising and falling in uneven bursts. She tried again, her voice barely above a whisper. Say it. She froze. My hands were at my sides. My expression was unreadable. I gave her nothing. You want to beg? I said. You want to cry? Fine. But you're going to say it first. Emily's lips trembled. Say what? That you did it. I took another step forward. That you went behind my back. Another step. That you let him touch you. That you let him have you. She pressed harder into the wall, her hands curled into fists at her sides. I could see it, the war in her head. The part of her that still wanted to fight, to lie, to pretend she could fix this. And the part of her that knew it was over. Her lips parted. Her chest rose with a sharp inhale. And then, she stopped. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. You still can't do it, can you? Emily swallowed, her breath unsteady. I leaned in slightly. Just say it, Emily. My voice was quiet, deadly calm. Say it. Say you cheated. She let out a shaky breath, her entire body trembling now. Her fingers dug into the fabric of her jeans, like she wanted to tear herself apart rather than admit it. I waited, and then, finally, another pause. I made a mistake. I laughed. Cold, empty, sharp. A mistake, I repeated, like she had tripped on a sidewalk, like she had accidentally ordered the wrong drink at a coffee shop, like she hadn't spent weeks sneaking around with another man, lying to my face, humiliating me in my own home. You made a mistake? I said, tilting my head. Tell me, Emily. My voice darkened. When did the mistake start? She looked at me, confused. Was it the first time you smiled at him a little too long? The first time you let him put his hands on you? The first time you— Stop. Her voice cracked. Her whole body shook now, her hands trembling as they lifted like she was trying to physically stop me from saying it. But I didn't stop, because I wanted her to hear it, to feel it. How many times, Emily? I asked. How many times did you take your wedding ring off before going in? She gasped like I had slapped her. She blinked rapidly, a tear slipping down her cheek. But I felt nothing. She deserved this. I wanted her to drown in it. I was lonely. The words were barely above a whisper. I stiffened, and then I laughed. Louder this time. Emily winced. Lonely? I repeated. Oh, that's rich. That's the excuse you're going with. She wiped at her eyes quickly, like she didn't want me to see her cry. I wanted to grab her by the shoulders, shake her, make her understand what she had done. You were lonely, I said, stepping even closer, watching her shrink against the wall. And what? Instead of talking to me, instead of fixing whatever problem you thought we had, you spread your legs for him? She let out a strangled sob. She covered her mouth with her hand, shoulders shaking. Tell me, I pressed. Did you even think about me? Did you think about what would happen when I found out? Or did you just assume I'd never know? Emily sobbed again, shaking her head, her other hand clutching at her chest like she was in actual pain. I didn't. You didn't what? I growled. Didn't think? Didn't care? Didn't believe I'd ever see through your lies. Her eyes snapped up to mine, desperate. I still love you. I went completely still. For a long, silent moment, I just stared at her. Then I laughed again. It was empty, bitter, hollow. Because how could she even say that? After everything? After this? You don't love me, I said. Emily let out a soft, choked breath. I do. I shook my head. No, Emily. My voice was cold now, sharp as a knife. You loved how easy it was to lie to me. You loved that I trusted you. You loved having me in him. But you don't love me. Emily's face crumpled, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. Please, she whispered again. But I was already stepping back, already turning away, because I was done. And for the first time in this whole nightmare, she finally understood what that meant. Emily let out a broken sob, her body sinking to the floor as I walked away, leaving her there. Alone, exactly how she had made me feel. I walked away, not because I was done feeling the rage that had been boiling inside me for the last hour, not because I suddenly felt peace or because I had gotten some kind of closure. No, I walked away because she didn't deserve another second of my time. Behind me, Emily was sobbing, her broken breaths echoing in the silence of the house. I didn't stop. I didn't turn back. I let her cry, let her choke on her own shame, let her sit there on the floor and feel what it was like to be left behind. Because for once, for the first time since this all started, I was in control. I stepped into the kitchen, barely registering the gleaming countertop she had picked out, the new backsplash she had fought for, the floors that Marco and his crew had installed just a few days ago. The same floors he had walked all over. The same floors my wife had stood on while she smiled at him, while she let him touch her, while she let him take something that belonged to me. My grip tightened into fists. I needed a minute, a second to breathe before I did something I couldn't take back. I stared at the fridge, at the photos pinned under magnets. A picture of us at the beach last summer. A stupid selfie from a date night. A Christmas card from her parents. I ripped it down. Every last one of them. The photos. The memories. The life I had thought was real. I tossed them onto the counter and exhaled, trying to steady myself. Trying not to let the pure hatred I felt in this moment consume me whole. Because she didn't deserve that either. She didn't deserve my rage. She didn't deserve my pain. She didn't deserve anything from me ever again. Not a second chance. Not an explanation. Not even the dignity of a goodbye. I turned, grabbed my keys off the hook, and headed for the door. But the moment my hand touched the knob, her voice stopped me. Don't go. It was soft, weak, pathetic, like she still believed she could stop this, like she still thought she had some kind of power over me. I turned my head just enough to look at her. She was still sitting on the floor near the stairs, her legs pulled to her chest, her arms wrapped around herself like a child. Her eyes, red, swollen, desperate. I stared at her, and then I smiled. It wasn't warm. It wasn't kind. It was the kind of smile you give someone right before you put the final nail in their coffin. You don't get to ask me for anything, I said. Emily flinched. You don't get to beg. You don't get to cry. You don't get to sit there and act like you're the one who's hurt. She shook her head quickly, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts. You don't get to talk. I cut her off. Her mouth snapped shut, and then, finally, I gave her the only truth she ever needed to hear. You're nothing to me now. The moment the words left my mouth, something in her shattered. I saw it. Her lips parted, her chest stilled, her entire body went rigid, like she had just been shot, like I had just driven a blade straight through her heart. Good. She deserved it. I turned back to the door, twisting the knob. But before I could step outside, something slammed into me from behind. Emily's arms, gripping my shirt, pulling me back, desperate hands clawing at me like a woman on the edge of losing everything. Please, she sobbed against my back. Please don't leave. I can fix this. I can. I'll do anything. I pried her fingers off me, shoving her hand away. She stumbled back, tears streaking down her face, barely able to stand. She had never looked weaker to me than she did right now. And I felt nothing. Not pity. Not regret. Not a goddamn thing. You did this to yourself, I said, stepping over the threshold. She reached for me again. I slammed the door in her face. The second it clicked shut, her cries became muffled. A hollow, distant noise that no longer belonged to me. And I walked away. I didn't stop. Not when I heard her sobbing inside. Not when I heard her slam her fists against the door. Not when she screamed my name like it was some kind of lifeline, like saying it would make me turn around. I didn't turn around. Not then. Not ever. Because I was finally free.